Hey, Liam here from DigiWaza Multimedia. Thanks for joining me in this Blender 2.82 tutorial. In this episode, we're going to be making a low poly battle axe like you might find in a video game. We're going to keep this as low poly as we can while still looking halfway decent. We're not going to bake any normals on this. We're just going to leave it as is to see how good we can do with just a basic model job and a basic paint job in Substance Painter. So we'll model it in Blender. We'll take it into Substance Painter. I'm not going to bring it back into Blender in this episode. You can go back to my previous tutorial on modeling an industrial bar stool and watch the last video in that. And the way to get the materials on your models in Blender is just going to be the same as that. So I'm not going to cover that again. All right, cool. Let's get to work. I've got this cube selected. Let's hit X to delete. All right, let's hit Shift A. Let's pick Curve, Bezier Curve. I'm going to hit RY -90. It should stand straight up. Let's hit 1 on the numpad to go into front view. I'm going to hit RZ -90 to kind of make it look like this. It's also basically the first step we did in my previous tutorial on modeling an industrial bar stool. So check that out if you can. All right, so this is almost the shape of the handle that I want for the axe. If you want a straight handle, then all you would have done instead of adding this curve was add a cylinder. I would have probably set it up to be 8 to 12 vertices, so a relatively low res cylinder. And then you can just cap it the same way we're about to cap this one. A lot of battle axes do, in fact, have a straight handle. I'm just going to make this one with this curve because it's a little more complex. And you could use this to make like a fire axe or a woods axe or some other kind of axe for a different render as well. So for me, the cylinder one's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. So we're going to go a little more complex here. All right, let's get to work. I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. If you're new, this is what a curve looks like in edit mode. It has 2 main control points, and then each of the control points has these things right here called Bezier handles. They basically control how this curve operates. We already have almost the shape of the handle that I want. One thing I'm going to do is left click here, and then I'm going to turn the gizmo on, and then let's just slide this over just a little bit past the midline. And then I'm going to lessen the curve right here by clicking right here, left clicking, and move this one in just a little bit. So this gives me the sweep of the axe handle that I'm looking for. Okay, cool. If we come over to our control panel right here, we can see that only when we have a curve that we're working on will we have this option in our control panel, this one right here, which is our curves control. So let's click it. And then let's come down to the one that says geometry. Let's click that one, and it should open up. Let's go down to the one that says bevel, and then to the one that says depth. Let's hover over the number, left click, hold down the left click, and then move our mouse to the right, and we'll get it to thicken up a bit. I've gone to 0.04, and this looks pretty good to me. Okay, that's as far as I'm going to go with the shaping as a curve. Let's hit Tab to go into object mode. Let's hit right click and then convert to mesh. If we hit Tab to go back into edit mode, we can see that we in fact now have a mesh. So that's pretty cool. All right, the next step is we want to contour this a little more to make it look more like an axe handle. So I'm going to come right up here to the top, and let's click into edge select mode. And we could have picked number 2 at the top of the keyboard, I'm sure you're aware. All right, so let's come down to the bottom of the axe handle, and I'm going to select these 2 bottom edges right in the front of the inside of the handle. So I'm going to left click to select that one, and then I'm going to shift left click to get this one right here. All right, I'm going to turn those. I'm going to turn the gizmo on, and then I want to pull these out, and you can see what happens if I pull these out right now. It just doesn't look right. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that. I'm going to use proportional editing here. And if you're new to proportional editing, I'm just going to give a very basic explanation. What we want to do is pull these out while having geometry that's nearby flex with it so that it stays looking more organic. You saw how as I pulled that out, it just made this jarring, kind of jagged looking effect. We want it all to edit together. And so the way we do that is we can come right up here to the top, and we can pick this one that looks like a little target. If we left click it, it'll turn blue. That means it's on. Next to it real quick, like we're not going to change this, but if I click this, these are the different options I have for proportional editing. We're just going to leave it as stock for now. Now, another way you can get into proportional editing is to hit the O key. O turns it off and on. It's a toggle. So we just want to make sure that it's blue and on. Okay, now the way proportional editing works is as I go to move these, now I could hit GX, and as I do that, or using the gizmo by left-clicking and holding and dragging the arrow, which is the way I'm going to do it, what's going to happen is we're going to see a big circle appear. And that circle is the sphere of influence. That means all the geometry that's within the circle is going to move with our selection. So in this case, as we see, as I left-click and grab onto this arrow and begin to move it, you see that we get this gigantic circle. Now that's way too big. It's going to move all of this stuff with it, and it just isn't going to look right. Of course, I have to Control Z to undo that. So what I'm going to do is left-click, and as I begin my movement, we'll see that we get that big giant circle. Now if I use my scroll wheel and scroll wheel forward or away from me, the circle will get smaller and smaller, and it will limit the amount of influence we have. So now as I get in here and I go to move this, you can see that I don't have that jagged projection anymore. It's actually pulling on this geometry that's within it, the sphere of influence. Okay, I'm going to come around the back here and select these 2 points. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull it out towards the rear. And because we already have our sphere of influence set, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to come up here to the front. Let's get in a little closer and grab these 2 now. And then let's pull that one out just a little bit, something like that. Okay, so we're going pretty low poly here. So we're going to always have a little bit of an angle here, and you'll see that in a lot of video games. If you look closely at the assets that are kind of hanging on the wall or on the floor or something, they don't look perfect if you sit there and stare at them. So that's kind of what we're going to end up with, but we want to try to minimize that by trying to make sure that we don't have too big of weird angles. So let's just move that out a little bit too. All right, cool. I think that looks pretty good as a bottom axe handle. Let's go to the top and do the same thing. We've already have our proportional editing sphere of influence set. I'm going to grab this one and this one. These top 2 in the front. They should be in the same alignment as the ones on the bottom. And then let's pull this out just a little bit. Let's grab these back ones by left-clicking and shift left-clicking. And then let's pull this out just a little bit too. Okay, so to me, this looks like a weird angle right here, like I was talking about. We want to try to avoid those. Let's left-click these 2. And I have these up here selected, so let's hit Alt-A. Left-click, left-click. And then let's just pull that out just a little bit so it doesn't look like such a weird bend. And looks like we may have to do that on this side too. So just keep adjusting. Don't take too long with it because we're really trying not to make too detailed of an axe here. All right, so let's look at it from a distance. Maybe this one and this one. Sometimes they're hard to get with the gizmo in the way. All right, something like that might look pretty good. Okay, cool. I'm going to go with that. I think that looks pretty fair for an axe handle. Okay, so let's hit Vertex select mode there. And I'm going to hit Alt-A to make sure nothing's selected. Let's get to the very top. And I love when it disappears like that. It's always nice. All right, I'm going to get right in here close. Let's hit Alt left click to select the entire ring. Let's hit ES to bring this in just a little bit. I'm going to use the gizmo, or you could use the command GZ. And that brings up another good point. Right there you saw how much influence that had, so I'm going to Control Z. And then let's turn off proportional editing for this part. So let's kick that up. And then I'm just going to hit F to fill. All right, let's go to the bottom. Same thing here. Let's go all the way to the bottom. And it disappeared again. I love that. All right, cool. Let's get in here. All right, let's hit Alt left click to select the entire ring, ES to bring this in, and then let's just bring it down. I'm gonna have to move it forward just a little bit, something like that. And then let's hit F to fill. All right, cool. So there we are. We have kind of an axe handle. It's all kind of filled. So now let's unwrap it real quick. So let's hit Edge Select Mode. And let's just grab this entire edge loop here. So Alt left click, and then we'll right click and we'll mark that seam. let's work our way down to the bottom. Either one of these two front on the inside is the one we want. So I'm going to left click. And then we can hit Control left click all the way down as we go. And we get all the way to the bottom. Okay, and then we have that one. Let's right click, mark seam. Now we want this edge all the way around the bottom. So let's Alt, left click, right click, mark seam. Okay, so cool. So we have our axe handle basically all set up. That's what I'm gonna go with. Let's tab into object mode. And then let's hit Control A, and let's apply the scale. Let's hit Tab to go into edit mode. I'm gonna hit A to select everything. And then real quickly, let's open up a UV editor. I'm gonna open this, left click in the upper left corner, and then UV editor. Okay, so with this all selected, we can now hit U and unwrap. And this is the unwrap we get. And it's perfectly adequate for this process, so we're just gonna go with it. You can see it split the handle open and put the bottom and the top right here. Okay, cool. I'm gonna close this up just a little bit. Let's move on to the next phase. I'm gonna hit Tab and then Alt A, and then let's hit Shift A to add in a mesh cube. I'm gonna scale the cube down quite a bit. I'm gonna turn the gizmo on. I like the gizmo. I know some people probably don't, but that's okay. Let's hit SY till we get it kind of skinny here. See where our edges are, something like that. And then SZ to scale it down just a little bit, something like so. Let's bring it up just a little bit. I want the handle top to be hanging out just a little bit. I think it makes it look kind of a little bit more old school. And then let's SX to scale this in just a little bit. Okay, let's hit Tab to go into edit mode. Let's hit Control R. When we hit Control R, we'll get this edge loop. If we use our scroll wheel before we click anything else, we can get two of them. I'm gonna left click and then left click to leave them where they are. Now I want these to separate apart. I want this one to go this way and this one to go this way, so that's a scaling operation on the x-axis. So SX, and I can pull these out just a little bit, something like that. All right, cool. All right, let's go into face select mode. We can do it here or number 3 on the top of our keyboard. Let's click this first face here, and let's hit SY so it gets a little bit skinnier. And then let's hit SZ to make it just a little bit taller. All right, so that's what we look like so far. Okay, and that's pretty, still pretty chunky there, but we'll scale it in on the next one. All right, so let's see it kind of from the side. Let's hit SX to pull this out. Sorry. EX to pull that out like so. Now let's hit SZ to pull this up a little bit like so. And then I'm going to pull this down just a little bit. Okay, and then we want to scale this along the Y so it gets skinnier, so SY. Scale that something like so. And then EX to pull this next section out. SZ to make it taller. Let's pull this down just a little bit, something like that. And then I'm going to go into edge select mode, grab this bottom edge and pull it down just a little more. I like this sweep on the bottom a little more than on the top. Okay, and then while we're here, it looks like this edge could go down just a slight bit. So let's bring it down like so. Okay, cool. That looks pretty fair. All right, let's do one more extrusion. I'm going to go back into face select. Let's left click this front face. EX to pull out one more chunk. And then SZ to bring this up. And then let's just drag this down just a little bit. I want it to continue its sweep up here, but I want a more massive sweep at the bottom. So let's go into edge select mode. And let's just drag this down like so. Okay. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go back into face mode real quick, and let's grab this front face here, and let's scale on the Y. SY, let's scale that, and we'll make that pretty skinny. You want to make it pretty skinny, but not too skinny. We don't want it to be unobtainable when we go to unwrap, and you can't really tell the edge is that thick anyway. So let's SY just a little bit more, make it a little more skinny. And then another thing, you do not want it to go so far that it crosses itself. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the back here. And let's go into face select, which we are. I'm going to grab this back face. And let's hit SY to scale on the Y. Something like so. And then let's hit SZ to make this just a little thicker or a little skinnier. And let's drag this up just a little bit. Okay, and then let's hit EX to pull a little bit more out like so. And then, of course, SY to make it thinner on the Y-axis, something like so. And then let's hit EX and drag this out just a little bit more, like so. And then SY to make it a little skinnier. And then SZ to make this a little bit taller, something like so, which I think looks pretty fair. And then let's pull this down just a little bit, something like that. We can pull this out just a little bit longer. Okay, so there's the basic shape of our axe so far. So, of course, it doesn't look right with just a straight edge on the front and the back. So let's add some geometry across this area here by using our Control-R technique. So if I hit Control-R, you'll see I get one edge. If I scroll wheel forward till I have 3 is what I want. And then I'm going to just left click and then left click to leave those in there. Okay, cool. So now what we're going to do is we got to pull out some of these edges in the front. And this is what I meant by making sure they're still accessible. So while we're in face mode, which is what we want to be, I want to get in here and select these front couple faces. And this one as well. They might be a little hard to get. And then let's just pull those out just a little bit like so. That looks pretty good. And then I think I'm going to have to grab this front face. Let's go into edge mode. And we'll grab this front face here. This needs to come out just a little more. Like so. All right, that looks pretty good. While we're still in edge mode, let's grab this center one right here. And let's pull it out just a little bit too. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of a curve in the front. I don't want to go too far because we'll start looking kind of angular. So now let's do the back. Same thing here. We can just grab this edge, pull this out a little bit like so. And then we can grab these 2 edges here and pull these out to kind of match. Again, we want a bit of a curve. We want to try to minimize angularity, but since we're so low poly, that's just not going to happen. Okay, and let's see what we have so far. That looks pretty good. I think I'm going to actually pull this front edge out just a little more. Let's grab onto it. And then let's bring this out here and then up a little bit. And then, of course, we'll have to compensate by grabbing this one here and drag this out just a little bit. And we'll have to adjust all the way down. That's what a lot of this is just messing with it till it looks right. And believe me, you're going to want to mess with it just a little bit more than I am right here. So looks like this one needs to come out just a little more. Just bear with me. All right, and then we'll pull this out just slightly. Okay, that looks pretty good. Our axe is looking pretty good. I think the back end here is a little bit dull. So let's grab face mode. I'm going to grab this top one by left clicking and then go to the bottom one and Control left click. And then let's hit SY just to scale those in just a little bit and make it a little thinner. Okay, cool. If we hit tab now, we can go into object mode and we can see that we're only up to 270 vertices in this entire axe so far. And it's looking pretty good. I understand it's looking a little clunky, but we'll fix that here in just a minute. All right, so let's hit tab to go back into edit mode and let's unwrap this axe. In order to unwrap, I want to be in edge mode. And then I'm going to get this starting up here at the tip of the axe on the top. So let's left click this one and we're going to go all the way to the other end of the axe and hit Control left click and we should get that entire line. I'm going to shift over to the other side over here, hold down the shift key, left click, then follow it all the way back up to the top and hit Control left click and we'll have that entire area. Now I have to also get this little edge here on the front. So I'm going to hit Shift left click to make sure it's selected. So we've got this end here. And then we have to do the same thing on the other end. Shift, left click. Once we have all those selected, we can simply hit right click and mark seam. And so we've marked the entire top of the axe. Let's do the bottom because that's the next part. Let's grab and do the same thing. I'm going to grab this one here, follow it along to the front, all the way to the end, control left click to get that entire thing. I'm going to shift over to the back side, hold down the shift key, left click, follow it all the way along to this other side, hold down the control key and left click, and I'll get all of those. And we can hit right click and mark the seam. Now I got to get these front little edges again. They're hard to see, so I'm going to just left click this one. Once I have it, I'm going to right click and mark the seam. And then let's get back to this other one real quick, and let's see if we can get it from here. And then right click, mark the seam, and we've got that marked. Okay, and then I'm going to leave the front edge connected to the sides, so we're not going to do anything there, but we are going to come back and detach the back of the blade. So I'm going to grab this edge, go all the way to the bottom, left click, and then come to the top, shift, left click to get that one, and come all the way to the bottom, and control left click to get that one. Once I have all those selected, let's right click and mark the seam. Okay, cool. So we have this unwrapped the way that I would like to unwrap it. So I'm going to open this up. Before we do this, I always like to go into, hit tab to go into object mode. I need to right click, or sorry, not right click, control A, and we want to apply the scale. Let's hit tab to go into edit mode again. If we hit A to make sure it's all selected, and then we can hit U, unwrap. And this is what the unwrap looks like, which is pretty good. I don't really like the angle of this, so what we're going to do real quick is fix that. And I'll show you a quick trick of how to do that. When it's angled like this, the texture might go on crooked. Whatever texture we use could go on crooked, so we want this to be straight up and down. Before I can do anything to this one, I want to make sure I do the same thing to everything. So I'm going to come right up here in the top. Let's click this one right here. This is Island Select. And now when I just click here on any part of it, I get the entire UV island, or the entire part that I cut out. But I also want to hold shift and get these other pieces, because I'm first going to do a scale. We're going to scale. And I don't want to scale this one without scaling this one. So I'm going to hover my cursor over here, and we're going to scale this down just a touch. Maybe something like that. Okay, and now what's cool about it is I can grab just this island, and if I hit RZ, I can actually turn this straight up and down. And I want to use the grid lines to try to turn it as straight up and down as possible. And then I can use G to move this up just slightly, and that looks pretty good. Everything else is okay where it is, so I'm just going to leave it like that. All right, cool. So this is a perfectly adequate unwrap. We've got plenty of texture space here for us to get some good detail on our edge, and everything stayed in scale. All right, cool. Okay, just a few more steps left before we export this and go into Substance Painter. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is recalculate the normals. I have the handle selected here. Let's hit tab to go into edit mode, A to make sure it's fully selected, and then we're going to hit Shift N. That'll recalculate the normals so that they're all pointing outwards. The reason we do this right now is because if we get into Substance Painter and you can see through the mesh, through the front side and then the back side, or anything looks transparent or not right, it's probably a normals problem, and it's best to just correct that beforehand. So we just recalculate it for the handle. Let's grab the head, tab into edit mode, make sure the entire thing's selected by hitting A, and then hit Shift N to recalculate the normals. Okay, let's hit tab to go back into object mode. Okay, so now we have two pieces. They've each been unwrapped as we made them. Let's open this UV image editor. It should be open from last time, I can't remember. If not, remember, just come up here, left click, drag open a new window, click right here and pick UV image editor. You can see it right here, UV editor. All right, cool. So now let's join these two objects together, because in order to go into Substance Painter, we need all of our objects to be unwrapped all on one UV. Okay? All right, so the way we do that is I'm going to grab the handle first and then shift left click the axe head. All we have to do then is hit right click and then join. So now the object is all together as one unit. Let's come right over here to our control panels, go down to this one right here, the object data properties. it should have joined everything. I think we did everything at a smoothing angle of 61 degrees, or just as long as it's over 60 by a slight bit, it should be okay. So we need to check in the auto smooth box, which we should already have, and then just a little bit over 60, and that should make our axe all nice and smooth enough. Okay, so next step is, let's see what the unwrap looks like. As I said, we unwrap the head, unwrap the handle, and now let's see what it looks like in edit mode. So let's hit tab, the entire axe is selected, and then we see right over here we get a jumbled mess because it's trying to just combine the entire thing together. And it didn't do a very good job of it. It just took the two unwraps we had and laid them together, which left us with a lot of overlap. We can't have any overlap of our UVs when we go into Substance Painter, and it's generally not a good idea to have anything overlapping. In some applications, you may want to stack parts on top of each other because you want them to all have basically the same texture. But for this, we don't want that. Okay, so in order to get this a little better, let's hover over here with the entire axe selected in edit mode. We're going to hit U and then unwrap again. And now we get the axe unwrap. Nothing's overlapping. It's kept it all in scale, so the head and the handle are all in the same scale they are out here. And so we could just use this UV right here. It would work perfectly adequate. However, this entire texture space, we have a lot of wasted space in here. And the way it works is the more of this space you occupy with your parts, the more detail they can have. So I want to move the handle over because it doesn't need any more detail space. So up here in the top, we should hopefully still have Island Select selected. If not, it's just this one right here. Click it. And then I can left click to select that whole chunk, and then shift left click these other pieces of the handle, which is the top and the bottom. Now if we hit GX, we can simply slide these over out of the way. I'm going to leave those just like that. I'm not going to scale them or anything. We're going to leave them at that scale. Now let's collect the rest of the parts of the axe. So left click here and then shift left click these other pieces. And I want to scale these up because the axe head is what we're going to see more of, and I want to have more detail on that. So we need to scale this up. Make sure as we scale though that we scale all the parts of the axe head together. If we just scaled this one and not these, the texture would look different here. It would be in a different scale. So we want to make sure we have the whole axe head selected. And then we can just hit S to scale this up, like so. And then I'm going to grab just this main part of the axe, and we can hit RZ to turn it on its side. Make sure it's as good as possible. And then we can just use the G key to grab this and put this up into our texture space. Now it looks like it's a little big because it's overhanging the sides. So again, before we scale, we need to make sure all the pieces of this axe are selected. And then we can just hit scale, and let's scale it down just a little bit. All right, and then I can just move these pieces by hitting G, and we'll just put these up here. I'm going to move this one over just a little bit, grab this one, G, and let's bring this one right up in here. Okay, so we have a nice organized UV now. We gave a little more texture space to the axe head because we'll see that more, and we're ready to go. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is create an ID map. I'm going to hover over this middle part here, right click, join areas, and join that area. Okay, cool. So we're ready to give this an ID map. Now, essentially what we're doing is we're just giving the metal parts a blue color is what I'm going to give them. And then the handle, the wood parts are going to have a red color. And that's going to be exported with our FBX, which will allow Substance Painter to use that as our ID map. So it's pretty cool and it's pretty easy. First step though, if you try to do this and you forget this first step, you might get kind of confused and frustrated because things just won't work very well. So in edit mode, we'll hit A to make sure that if the entire thing is selected, we'll hit Alt A to make sure that nothing is selected. So we had everything selected. We don't want that. We want everything deselected. Hopefully that's not confusing. Just remember, in edit mode, nothing selected. Hit Alt A. Okay, that'll save you a lot of frustration. All right, the next step is we're going to go right up here to edit mode, and we're going to click that, and we're going to come down to Vertex Paint. Once we come into Vertex Paint, we get this new control center for all of our Vertex Paint controls. If we come over to our control panel here, left click where the screwdriver and the wrench are, we also have these controls now. All right, so we can get going. It's important to note that we want to be right here where it says Vertex Paint. There's two little boxes here. This one is Face Select, and this one is Vertex Select, almost like we're in edit mode, but we don't have an edge select option. We want to make sure that the face select is selected in blue, and we can see all the faces here. If I click it, you can see I can't see anything. This is not what we want. We want this to be blue so we can see all these faces. Okay, before we get started on this, let's go down to our color picker, and I'm going to use blue as the ID color for the metal parts or the axe head. So I'm just going to bring this up into the blue zone here. And then let's come down to where it says color palette. Let's click color palette. And I already did, I guess, and it's open. So you should just click there. And then let's add this color to our color palette. So by clicking color palette, we can add a new color palette. Then we can add this, with the plus key, this color to our color palette. It's not essential that you do this, but if we do make a mistake, we want to go back to that color, it's easier to just pick it out of our palette. Okay, cool. Now all we have to do is hover our cursor over the parts we want to select, and we can just hit the L key. And you can see that it turned gray, and I'll have to just do it for most parts of the axe. This front edge looks like it got selected. I'm going to hover over it just to be sure. And then the back edge really needs it too. L to select. And then the underside, L to select. Okay, so we have the entire axe head selected. And now we can just hit Shift K, and it'll all turn blue. And that will be our ID color for the metal. Excuse me. Okay, cool. Before we move on to the next color, we need to make sure nothing is selected. So let's hit Alt A. So nothing is selected. You see it still stays blue here. I'm going to come down to the color picker. Let's pick red, and you can pick any color you want. I'm going to hit this plus sign under palette to add that to our color palette. And then now with nothing selected out here, Alt A to make sure nothing's selected, we can just go through and use our L key to select various parts of our axe head. And we can see that I almost have it. Oh, she disappeared on me again. I love when that happens. All right, and then L just to get this bottom part here. Once we have the entire parts we want selected, we can hit Shift K, and the whole thing turns red. Okay, so cool. So this FBX that we're about to export will remember this, and it'll pick it up in Substance Painter. So that's really all we need to do. All right, so I'm going to come up here to Vertex Paint, click here, and then I'm going to go into object mode. Make sure our axe is selected, which it should be, and then let's export this in preparation for use in Substance Painter. We're going to go to File, and then we're going to go down to Export, and then we're going to come down here to FBX, and then we're going to pick a place for it. I'm going to name this axe_3A. That's what I'm going to name it as, and it's going to go on my desktop. And then I want to come over here where it says Selected Objects. Make sure that we have that checked so it doesn't pick up our camera or anything else. So only the objects that are selected, which should just be our axe. And then object types, mesh. Let's just click mesh. Okay. And then go ahead and export that FBX. All right, cool. I'll see you in Substance Painter. Just remember where that model is. It should be an FBX on your desktop or wherever you saved it, and because we'll need to pick that up in Substance Painter. All right, see you in the next episode.